Hello and welcome into this week's Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series Rewind show right here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thank you once again for joining me today. If this is your first time catching a Racing News Now video, consider going down below to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from RNN. On today's Cup Rewind, we're looking back at Sunday's Consumers Energy 400. 200 laps, 400 miles around the 2-mile Michigan International Speedway in Brooklyn, Michigan. This was a pretty good race. This new package seems to more or less have had the desired effect at this track. Honestly, I don't remember if we got this kind of racing in the first race at Michigan this year. I don't think we did, or at least not to the extent that we did in this race. This was some pretty good racing. Yes, it kind of mirrored Daytona and Talladega just a bit. You didn't quite get the packs that you get at Daytona and Talladega, but drafting was a major factor in this race. And to be honest, I think it made it pretty good because when you add in the drafting element that we had in this race that we really haven't had as strongly at Michigan in the past few years, it kind of took away the disadvantage that dirty air gives you to an extent, because the draft kind of negates that effect. So we actually could see passes. Not necessarily quite as many as I think a lot of us would like to see, but it's a stride in the right direction, I think, because there was some good racing in this race. There was some good side-by-side racing. So, in essence, I would call this a small win for NASCAR's part. We're moving in the right direction in terms of, I think, what the racing should be, at least in the short term. 6 caution flags in this race, though, for a total of 24 laps. Nothing to cause a caution happening in Stage 1. That ended at lap 60. Your Stage 1 winner would be Martin Truex Jr. That was one of the bigger stories of this race. Truex failed, it was either post-qualifying or pre-race inspection, and had to drop to the rear at the beginning of the race. He was going to start, I believe it was 15th. Drove his way to the front in one stage and won the first stage. That was absolutely incredible. Truex, I think, was one of really the 3 fastest cars early on in this race. Really early on, it looked like it was going to end up being a battle between Truex, Hamlin, and Keselowski. Stage 2, we had a couple of incidents. First one came at lap 117 as the 2 of Brad Keselowski spun off turn 4. Lap 122, multi-car incident on the front stretch as we were coming to the end of stage number 2, involving the 3 of Austin Dillon, the 8 of Daniel Hemrick, and the 10 of Eric Almirola. Almirola kind of washing up off of turn 4, thought he was giving Hemrick enough room to get up to the wall and to get him the run that he needed. Hemrick didn't quite move up. Hemrick thought he was where he needed to be, and Almirola ends up turning himself off the nose of Hemrick, which ends up turning him into the left rear quarter panel of Austin Dillon and causing a wreck as we come to the green and white checkers to end stage 2, of which Kyle Busch was your winner. 3 incidents in stage number 3. First one at lap 134 as the 53 of Spencer Boyd wrecks in turn 4. Lap 138, the 21 of Paul Menard turns the 14 of Clint Boyer into turn 3. Another one of those deals where just kind of fighting for space, and one guy thought he was giving the other guy enough room, the other guy thought he was in the right place, and it turns into a mess, just fighting for real estate that you both want to have. Lap 150 was the final caution of the race as Ricky Stenhouse spun in turn 4. 19 lead changes in this race. So I think that should tell you all you need to know about how chaotic this race was and how good the racing really was. Leading the most laps was Brad Keselowski with 66 laps, led 52 laps went to Joey Logano, 43 laps went to Martin Truex, 22 laps were led by Kevin Harvick, 6 laps went to Denny Hamlin, 5 laps led by Kurt Busch, 3 laps went to Ryan Blaney, and 3 laps also went to Kyle Busch. All right, on to your results. Truex drove his way from the back to the front in Stage 1 and won that first stage. Kyle Busch won the second stage. Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, all 3 Penske cars were fast in this race. Who would come out on top in this one? And it would be the driver of the 4 car, Kevin Harvick, back-to-back years winning the second Michigan race of the season. Very fast car at the end of the race for that 4 car. I don't think there was going to be any stopping him at the end of this race. Harvick was just on a rail at the end of this race and ends up taking the victory in Michigan. Had to hold off Denny Hamlin at the end of the race. Hamlin strong from start to finish in this one. Just couldn't quite close it out for his 4th win of the season. Kyle Larson, a very strong finish for him. Not been a great season for Kyle Larson, but a good finish nonetheless as he is trying to fight to keep himself in the playoffs this season. Martin Truex landed in the 4th position in that 500th start for him. Was kind of hoping he would win in that 500th start in that special paint scheme that he had for it, but unfortunately 4th was all he could muster in this one. And a strong top 5 finish for Daniel Suarez. And we'll see a lot of these guys in the top 10 here. The top 10 got a little jumbled at the end of the race as it turned into a fuel mileage race, and a lot of guys in the last lap end up running out of fuel. So there's a lot of guys here in the top 10 that wouldn't have necessarily finished in the top 10 had the fuel mileage not come into play. The rest of your top 10, though, were Kyle Busch, Ryan Preece, William Byron, Chase Elliott, and Alex Bowman. 11th through 20th, definitely some names down here that we're not used to seeing quite so high on the running order. First and foremost, there being Ty Dillon in 11th, a very strong run for him. Somewhat because of the fuel mileage, everybody else running out at the end of the race, but still a good finish nonetheless for that 13 car. Ryan Newman came home in 12th. Very good run for him as he tries to fight to stay in playoff relevancy as well. Austin Dillon, even after his wreck at the end of Stage 2, brought it home in 13th. And a good run for Chris Buescher. He was up there in the top 5 late in this one. And unfortunately, couldn't quite close it out. I believe he was one of those cars that ran out of fuel at the end of this one. And then David Reagan down here in 16th. Pretty good run for him in that front row motorsports car. 21st through 30th, Kurt Busch down here in 23rd. Ryan Blaney, 24th. I believe those were 2 of the guys that ran out of fuel at the end of the race. So not as good of runs as they probably should have had in this one. Blaney was up front for a lot of this one, as his other Penske teammates were. So definitely not the finish that that 12 car deserved in this race. Daniel Hemrick came home in the 26th position. Bubba Wallace down here in 27th. Final page 31st through 38th. Eric Almirola, after his wreck, was still running at the end of this one, albeit 7 laps down in 33rd. Jimmy Johnson having problems in this race as well. Does not do him any favors in the playoff picture, as we will see when we get to the playoff grid here in a moment. 34th, 8 laps down at the end of this one for Jimmy Johnson. And then Clint Bowyer, 37th on the day after his incident with Paul Menard, out at lap 139 and finishing in the 37th spot. Not doing him any favors as he tries to fight around that playoff bubble as well. So that is your results from the Consumers Energy 400. So let's head over to the Media Center. We'll see what Kevin and his team had to say after their second victory of the season.
Or not, but there he goes. To be honest, we love coming to Michigan. We love this racetrack, and I think if you look at the history of the 4-car, we've been fast here every time we've ever came. We had a great car here in the spring. Of my own doing, we had too much left front camber in the car, in the spring, and never could put ourselves in position to lead the race because every time a caution come out, we had to put 4 tires on our car when other guys were putting 2 on. So, the biggest thing coming back was to fix that problem and to try to, hit some more details and try to make the car a little bit better. But overall, it's the same car that we ran here last time, and it didn't hardly have a scratch on it last time. And to be honest, I was a little disappointed that it was only on the body plate for like half a day. And I'm like, surely to God they didn't get everything done to that thing in a half a day. That you try to continually make your cars better and update them. And it was good, and it's been fast all weekend. And everybody on the 4 team just did a great job of, like I said, hitting those details all weekend.
I felt like the most important pass was the 2. I felt like if he got around those guys before I did, he'd be more difficult to pass. I felt like the 22 fell off a lot as we got into the second half of the run compared to our cars. So, he did a good job of putting himself in the right spots when I was behind him, and eventually just kind of guessed wrong, and I was able to get up underneath him there, coming through the middle of 3 and 4 and side draft and finish the pass. So it was definitely. I needed to get a good restart, and it's really, it's kind of short-term everything. You need to have short-term memory when you get done with something and move on, and on the restart, it's just one lap at a time, and really one situation at a time to be able to try to put yourself in the best position that you can lap after lap.
All right, so let's take a look at your playoff grid before wrapping up here today. Obviously, Harvick moves into the 2-win category here on the playoff grid. Not a lot of other changes, though, except down here near the cutoff line. Larson and Jones kind of more securely putting themselves in the playoffs. They're still not quite safe yet. We still got 3 races left. A lot can happen in 3 races. And those are 3 very different tracks between Bristol, Darlington, and Indianapolis. So a lot can happen in those 3 races, but Kyle Larson and Eric Jones definitely a lot more secure in the playoffs than they were a few weeks ago. This battle down here at the cutoff line, though, this is really shaping up very well between 4 drivers right here. Ryan Newman, with his 12th place run, you wouldn't think a 12th place run would do a lot of good for you in the playoff picture, but with Clint Bowyer and Jimmy Johnson both having bad days, and Suarez being as far back as he was coming into this race, Ryan Newman now sits 16 points above the cutoff line. Not secure by any means, but in a lot better spot than he was coming into this race. Clint Bowyer has fallen back to that 16th spot. He now only holds a 6-point gap over 17th place Daniel Suarez. Suarez came into this race like 23 points back, and now sits only 6 points outside the playoffs. That is what a top 5 finish can do for you. And Suarez is definitely not out of this thing yet. To be honest, last week I was kind of thinking he was going to be out of it at this point because it didn't really seem like 23 points was something that, with where that team had been running, was feasible for them to make up in 4 races. But apparently I was wrong, and now he sits 6 points out and definitely in a very good position to get into the playoffs. Jimmy Johnson, on the other hand, 16th coming into this race, now sits 18th, 2 spots out of the playoffs and 12 points out of the playoffs. This whole crew chief swap with 5 races left before the playoffs, I don't think that's going to do many good things for them. Yes, what happened to Jimmy in this race didn't really have anything to do with who was on the pit box, but I don't see that team being able to rebound well enough to get back into the playoffs. They weren't running all that great to begin with yesterday, and I don't know. I don't see Jimmy Johnson rebounding from this over the next 3 weeks. I hope I can be proven wrong. I don't see it happening. That team just does not seem to be in the right place to be able to rebound effectively and get back into the playoffs. But that is your playoff grid following the Consumers Energy 400 at Michigan, and I believe that'll do it for us on this Cup Series Rewind. We did have an Xfinity Rewind and a Truck Rewind go up yesterday. Trucks at Michigan, Xfinity at Mid-Ohio. So go check those out if you haven't already. And what do we got coming up this week? Diecast review, as usual, coming up on Wednesday. Brett Moffitt's Homestead winner from 2018, the race he won the championship in. And then lots coming up next weekend. We've got K&N East and West action. We've got all three major series at Bristol. We've got ARCA at Springfield. So we've got a lot happening for you next week. So make sure, if you're not already, you need to go down below, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from RNN. While you're down there, why don't you hit that big thumbs up button if you like the video. It is much appreciated when you do. But at that, this has been the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series Rewind Show. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.